In a time, before the foundations of the world were laid, the Lamb was already slain in the mind of God. This divine mystery, hidden for ages, was now revealed in the most unexpected moment, at the hour of Christ's death. As the skies darkened and the earth trembled, a veil was torn, not only in the temple but across the dimensions. A heavenly rupture opened the way to a truth few had dared to contemplate, the descent of the Son of God into the abyss of the dead. Why would the King of Kings descend into such darkness? Why would the light enter the domain of shadows? The Scriptures, though veiled, whisper this truth throughout the ages. Peter declared, "He went and preached to the spirits in prison," 1 Peter 3 verse 19. This cryptic line holds the weight of eternity. What prison? What spirits? And what message did the Savior bring into that realm? Let us journey into this sacred mystery. As Jesus breathed his last breath upon the cross and declared, "It is finished," his spirit did not ascend immediately to the Father. Not yet. First, he would fulfill a divine mission foretold from ancient times. He would descend into Sheol, the realm of the dead, not as a victim, but as a conqueror. Sheol, also known in Greek as Hades, was a divided realm. One side, often called Abraham's bosom, held the righteous who died in hope. The other, a dark place of torment and despair, held the wicked and rebellious. Between them lay a great chasm, fixed and impassable. The Son of God entered this realm, not with fear, but with authority. His arrival was not silent. The very foundations of the underworld shook. Demons trembled. The fallen sons of God, chained in gloomy dungeons since the days of Noah, felt a presence they could not comprehend. The promised one, long awaited by prophets and patriarchs, had come, not to be judged, but to judge. In the righteous chamber, the spirits of David, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Abraham rose in awe. Their faith, long tested, was now rewarded. The one they spoke of, the one they foresaw in visions and psalms, now stood among them in glory. "Lift up your heads, O gates." David had once written, and now, the gates of Sheol trembled at his voice. He proclaimed freedom. Not a freedom of rebellion, but of redemption. The chains of death were broken. The righteous souls were gathered, like a harvest ready to ascend. But the descent was not only for the righteous. Christ's presence invaded the depths of torment, where the rebellious and unrepentant groaned in eternal regret. To them, his message was not of hope, but of victory. He did not preach for conversion, he proclaimed that the reign of death was over. That the cross was not a defeat, but a divine ambush against the ancient serpent. Imagine the moment when the Prince of Peace stood before the fallen angels. The ones who corrupted mankind, the ones who watched the crucifixion with glee, now witnessing the impossible. The Son of God had entered their domain, not as a captive, but as the judge of all. In this act, Jesus fulfilled the prophecy of Genesis 3 verse 15. He crushed the serpent's head, not merely on the cross, but here, in the heart of darkness. The keys of death and Hades were taken, not with violence, but with divine authority. Christ had not come to negotiate. He came to reclaim. From this moment forward, death would no longer hold the righteous captive. The grave lost its sting. The tomb was no longer the end, but a door. As he prepared to ascend, a procession began, souls set free, led by the captain of their salvation. The gates of heaven awaited their arrival, and the hosts of angels prepared for a victory unlike any before. And yet, the story was not over. What Christ accomplished below would soon echo above. The resurrection was near. But before that glorious morning, the earth would feel the weight of what had occurred in secret. Graves would open. Saints would walk. And the world would never be the same. This descent was not only a historical moment, it was a divine declaration. Hell has no power. Death is defeated. The Son of God reigns. From the broken path of Tamar, we transition into the story of Rahab, one of the most shocking and powerful testimonies of redemption in all of Scripture. Found in the book of Joshua, Rahab is introduced not as a leader or a prophetess, but as a prostitute living in the fortified city of Jericho, a city destined for destruction. Yet in the rubble of this pagan stronghold, a light of unexpected faith emerges. Rahab's house was built into the city wall. It was a place of shadows, sin, and secrecy. But when 2 Israelite spies entered Jericho to scout the land, they found shelter in the most unlikely place, Rahab's home. With soldiers searching the streets, Rahab hid the spies on her rooftop, risking her own life. Why would a woman so deeply embedded in the corrupt culture of Jericho make such a dangerous choice? Her words to the spies reveal something extraordinary. I know that the Lord has given you this land. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. Joshua 2 verses 9 and 11. In those few lines, Rahab proclaimed what many Israelites themselves struggled to grasp. Her heart had been awakened. She believed not in the gods of Canaan, but in the living God of Israel. This moment of faith was not just a passing belief, it was a turning point in history. Rahab's decision to shelter the spies saved her family, spared her life, and placed her into the bloodline of the Messiah. After Jericho fell, she was grafted into the nation of Israel, and eventually married a man named Salmon. Their union produced Boaz, a man whose life would be defined by grace and compassion, 2 virtues he likely inherited from his mother's story. Rahab's presence in Jesus' genealogy sends a thunderous message: your past does not disqualify you from God's future. A prostitute became a protector. A Canaanite became part of God's covenant people. Her name, once whispered in shame, was forever engraved in the lineage of the Savior of the world. And then, from the son of Rahab comes another woman whose name continues the narrative of divine redemption, Ruth. Ruth's origin story is wrapped in loss and foreignness. She was a Moabite, from a nation birthed in scandal and steeped in idolatry. Her people were longtime enemies of Israel. And yet, when tragedy struck her husband's family, and all the men, including her own husband, died in Moab, Ruth made a choice that would forever change her destiny. Her mother-in-law, Naomi, broken and bitter, urged Ruth to return to her homeland. But Ruth's answer was one of the most beautiful declarations of loyalty and faith ever recorded. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Ruth 1 verse 16. With those words, Ruth left behind her gods, her culture, and her future in Moab. She chose instead the path of a foreign widow in Israel, an act of both love and courage. In Bethlehem, Ruth's humility and diligence led her to the fields of Boaz, a wealthy and noble man. Unknowingly, she gleaned in the field of her Redeemer. Boaz saw not only her beauty, but her faith and devotion. In a time when women were often overlooked, Boaz honored her, protected her, and eventually married her. Their union brought forth Obed, who became the father of Jesse, the father of David. Through Ruth, we learn that grace crosses borders. God's love isn't limited to a race or a nation. A Moabite widow became the great-grandmother of Israel's greatest king. She became a symbol of loyal love, steadfast faith, and divine inclusion. And yet, the story does not end there. From Tamar's boldness to Rahab's faith to Ruth's loyalty, the genealogy continues with a woman whose name is not even mentioned. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Matthew 1 verse 6. Her name is Bathsheba. Bathsheba's story is drenched in pain, controversy, and complexity. She was the wife of Uriah, a loyal soldier in David's army. While Uriah was away at war, King David saw Bathsheba bathing and sent for her. The Bible does not clearly say whether she was willing or not. But the power dynamics were unmistakable. A king summoned her. She came. She conceived. To cover the scandal, David orchestrated Uriah's death. Bathsheba mourned her husband, and then was taken into David's palace. The child of their union died as judgment fell upon David's sin. But the story, as always in the hands of God, didn't end in tragedy. David repented. God, in his mercy, restored him. And Bathsheba gave birth to another son, Solomon, the wisest king in Israel's history. In time, Bathsheba became an influential figure in the royal court. She was the one David promised would be the mother of the heir. She advocated for Solomon. She ensured the continuation of the promise. Though unnamed in the genealogy, her presence is undeniable. Her story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, scandal, loss, and injustice, God can bring restoration and purpose. He does not erase the pain, but He can redeem it. 4 women. 4 legacies of grace. But the genealogy does not end with Solomon or with Bathsheba. It builds toward the ultimate woman in this divine narrative, Mary. We'll explore her story in part 3. Stay with us. But even as the man stood unmoved by their threats, there was something else taking shape, an awareness spreading through the ranks of the watchers. A tension that hadn't been there before. Some began to lower their weapons. Their senses, once dulled by pride, now picked up on a strange presence surrounding this mortal man. It wasn't fear they felt, it was reverence, an invisible weight that pressed upon them as if the heavens themselves were leaning in to witness this moment. He did not speak a word. His eyes, deep and unbroken, scanned the host of giants. Not with arrogance or challenge, but with a quiet authority that unsettled even the mightiest among them. This was not the authority of kings or warriors. It was the authority of the Ancient One, the very breath of the Almighty echoing through his stillness. The man was simply a vessel, but a vessel overflowing with divine presence. The largest among the giants, a creature named a Ramsel, stepped forward. His arms were like tree trunks, veins pulsing like rivers beneath his thick, stone-colored skin. He had crushed entire nations under his heel. Yet now, his steps faltered. Something about this encounter scratched at the ancient memories burned into his bones, memories of a time before rebellion, when the sons of heaven walked rightly before the Most High. You do not tremble before us? Aramzel asked, his voice a low quake that rippled the air. You know what we are. Still, the man did not speak. You are flesh, another roared from behind, you are dust. Yet you dare stand before the children of the stars. But a silence fell before the man could answer, and it wasn't his doing, it came from above. The clouds parted, not with thunder, but with light. A radiant pulse of golden fire poured over the man's form. No wings appeared. No sword was drawn. Yet in that moment, every watcher, every giant, every descendant of the Nephilim fell to their knees, not because they were forced, but because they could not stand. The very ground beneath them commanded it. Their bodies could resist no longer what their spirits had long ago remembered. The heavens bore witness. They had encountered something purer than law, fiercer than fire, older than time, obedience. The man raised his hand, not to strike but to intercede. What followed was not wrath, but mercy. His lips moved, finally breaking the sacred silence. Return, he said. You were not made for this. The words cut deeper than any blade. For some among the giants, tears began to fall. Not of regret, but remembrance. The weight of eons of rebellion crashed into their hearts, and a groan rose up from among them, not of battle, but of mourning. A great tremor swept across the valley. Trees bent. The stones shook. And the watchers who still bore the taint of their fallen fathers began to rise, not in strength, but in surrender. The man had called them not to war, but to repentance. Not to chains, but to awakening. Yet among them, there were those who still clenched their fists. The corrupted, those who had sealed themselves to darkness beyond redemption, felt rage ignite once more. They would not kneel. They would not bow. Not to a man. Not even to the God who had made them. The man turned toward them, his face unshaken. You have chosen, he said. The wind obeyed him. The ground obeyed him. The very elements themselves stood still in awe. And then the fire came. Not a fire of destruction, but of purification. It did not consume the trees or the rocks or the earth. It consumed the rebellion itself. Those who stood in opposition were not merely defeated, they were unmade. Their forms dissolved into wind and dust, not by wrath, but by justice. It was as if heaven itself had reached down and erased what had once been carved into the wrong books of time. The remaining ones wept. They knew their fate was not to walk again among the lands of men. But in that moment, they longed for the Maker. The man who had stood before them was not the end of their story, but the signpost that pointed them back toward the path they had long forgotten. He left the valley in silence. No songs followed him. No celebrations. Only awe. Behind him, the once mighty bowed low, not in defeat, but in reverence. That was the day the giants bent their knees, not to armies, not to swords, but to a single man filled with the presence of the living God. And heaven recorded every moment. The desert night descended like a thick, silent curtain, casting a deep indigo over the camp where Abraham stood in solemn prayer. Flames flickered in the fire pit, and shadows danced against the rocks, whispering the mystery of what had transpired. The three celestial visitors were gone, yet the weight of their presence lingered, heavier than stone. Abraham's eyes, though aged, gleamed with something otherworldly. He had seen the Eternal seated within mortality. Miles away, in the hills near Hebron, echoes stirred, giants. They were beings of old, birthed from rebellion, children of corrupted unions, towering in stature, their blood humming with ancient defiance. These were not the Rephaim or the sons of Anak alone, but remnants of a forgotten world, walking remnants of judgment delayed. Yet something had shifted. In the spiritual realm, winds began to shift direction. The eldest among the giants, a being named Arakel, awoke from a restless slumber. His dreams had been disturbed by a voice not heard since the deluge. A presence calling not in thunder, but in stillness. In the vision, a man, frail in body yet cloaked in radiant fire, stood before the throne of the Most High, and the giants trembled at the man's authority. It was Abraham. They didn't know his name. Not yet. But his voice had pierced the unseen realm. A voice that didn't cry out for vengeance, but pleaded for mercy, for the righteous in Sodom, for a people not his own. That voice moved the heavens. In the days that followed, a strange silence overtook the region. Birds took flight from the trees, foxes fled their dens, and the wind carried whispers of something coming. Abraham walked again to the oak grove of Mamre, alone, when he noticed something unusual. The ground vibrated beneath his feet, not from thunder or army, but from something ancient approaching. From the edges of the forest came massive figures. Beings taller than any man, clothed in animal skins, eyes filled with centuries of pain and rebellion. They did not roar or raise weapons. They bowed. Slowly, deliberately, bending knees that had never knelt since the days of the flood. Abraham stood still. He did not speak. He did not fear. His spirit burned with the presence of the one who had visited him. The giants bowed, not to a man of power, but to a man of covenant. In the heavenly courts, angels stood still in awe. For the first time since the rebellion of the Watchers, the offspring of that ancient sin bent before a child of clay. "Why do you kneel?" Abraham asked quietly, his voice like the hush of wind through the cedars. The eldest giant, Arakel, raised his eyes. "We saw him with you." "Who?" "The one whose name we dare not speak. The one who gave us breath, and judged our fathers. We saw his glory resting on you like fire." And then, like dust before the wind, they departed. Not in haste, but in reverence. A mystery, sealed in time. This event would never be recorded in scrolls or sung in Hebrew songs. But in the realm of spirit, the day would be remembered, the day the sons of rebellion acknowledged a servant's covenant. The day giants bowed. Later that night, Abraham lay by the fire, watching the stars, the very same stars God had asked him to count. Not even the heavens could number the mysteries unfolding through one man's obedience. He remembered the words, "Through your seed, all nations of the earth shall be blessed. But what seed could bring such reverence from the enemies of God? What promise could carry such authority? The answer lay not in Abraham, but in the one who would come through him, a descendant who would do more than make giants kneel. He would make demons flee. He would crush the serpent's head. He would be both priest and king. The story was far from over. The air thickened as the ancient echoes of divine purpose began to stir. Beyond the veil of what eyes could see, realms intertwined. Giants, once unshakable titans, stood now, in strange silence, glancing toward the eastern horizon, as if summoned by a force older than their own might. The earth groaned. Trees whispered. Animals fled. For the man walked. His feet pressed into the ground not like any other man before. It was as if creation itself responded to him. He bore no crown of gold nor armor of war. His garment was simple. His back straight. His gaze resolute. And yet, the world recognized him, the one from ancient days. Stories were whispered in the shadowy regions of Bashan and the high fortresses of the Anakim. Legends told of one who would walk among men and yet command the heavens. The giants knew that name. They had heard it thundered in the heavens long before they ever saw the light of the sun. He was not of their kind, but the authority he carried was beyond comprehension. As he approached, their knees buckled, not from fear alone, but from awe. Their mighty limbs trembled, their weapons fell to the dust. One, known as Arameel, the tallest among them, whose voice could shatter stone, found his mouth sealed. Not by force, but by holiness. He dared not speak. Another, Dagon of the highlands, lifted his hand in defiance, then dropped it, as if the weight of eternity pressed against it. These giants, once drunk with power, had bowed before no king, no beast, no god of men. But now, as this solitary man drew near, they sank, some to their knees, others flat to the earth. It was not surrender. It was recognition. In this man walked the presence of the Ancient of Days. It was a return. A reckoning. The moment when the children of rebellion would face the shadow of their undoing. They knew, deep within the marrow of their unnatural bones, that this meeting had been foretold long ago. He spoke, not loudly, not with fury, but with clarity that split the spiritual sky. You were mighty among men, but not mighty before the Lord. You built towers and defied the heavens. You consumed the land, the blood of the innocent cried out because of you. His voice carried into places unknown. Realms shuddered. Spirits stilled. You were not forgotten, he continued, and now, you will remember the word spoken before the foundation of the world. And then, silence. The giants did not move. They could not. Every echo of rebellion in them was being judged, not by wrath alone, but by truth. And truth stood there in the form of a man, who carried eternity in his breath and justice in his steps. One dared to ask, "Who are you?" He answered only with his presence. The weight of his being flooded the valley. Suddenly, the atmosphere fractured like glass under divine pressure. A rumble came, not from the earth, but from the spiritual dimension. Thrones were shifting. Chains were being forged, not of metal, but of light. The watchers, those once cast down, saw it all. They knew this was not just a man. This was the representation of divine authority wrapped in flesh. The Son of the Most High. And in that moment, the giants, those remnants of the fallen, the distorted legacies of rebellion, knew the time had come. The man raised his hand, and with no effort, a light descended. It did not burn. It revealed. Each one saw their beginning and their end in a flash of revelation. The pride that once filled them was stripped away like ash in the wind. This was not a war of swords, but a war of presence. Holiness was their undoing. Righteousness their ruin. And still, he stood. No one spoke again. No one dared. He turned, not with haste, but with purpose. The mission was not only about them. This was a sign. A signal to all powers and dominions that the time of silence was over. What was promised was unfolding. The giants remained, kneeling, some weeping without tears, their massive frames trembling beneath the weight of eternal reality. A voice echoed, not from him, but around him, every knee shall bow, and every tongue confess. And so it began. The man walked away, but nothing remained the same. The realm had changed. The heavens had marked the moment. The watchers took note. Angels hovered at a distance in reverent awe. And somewhere, in the deep heart of the earth, the gates rattled. Something ancient had awakened, and something eternal had taken one step closer. The air grew thick with divine awe as the path of the man pierced deeper into the land once thought untouchable, where giants, long reigning in silence and dread, now watched with trembling reverence. Each step he took was a disruption of the ancient balance, not by force, but by authority that none among them could deny. He bore no sword, no army, no crown forged by hands of men, only the echo of heaven upon his soul and the fire of righteousness that radiated like thunder in silence. The giants, towering beings of old, those born of the forbidden unions between the sons of God and daughters of men, were not merely creatures of brute strength. They held memories of the heavens before the fall, whispers of light before darkness reigned within their lineage. But time had long corrupted their purpose, twisting awe into terror, and dominion into bondage. Yet now, before this man, this one whose steps disturbed even the spirits of the underworld, they felt something ancient stir within them, a call, an order, a law older than their rebellion. The man lifted his eyes to the highest of them, a giant whose bones groaned with the weight of centuries. His name was Rimhazar, once a chieftain among the Watcher's children. His face, weathered and carved by the winds of forgotten battles, betrayed a flicker of emotion no giant had shown in ages: fear, awe, and perhaps, hope. "You remember the voice of the highest," the man spoke, and his voice was not loud, but it was as if the mountains themselves paused to hear him. Rimhazar nodded slowly, his towering form trembling. "We have wandered long in darkness. But that voice, I remember. It summoned stars. It tore the veil. It wept over Eden's gate." The man stepped closer. "Then bow, not to me, but to him who sent me. For the time of reckoning has come. And even the mighty must answer to their Maker." A hush fell, deeper than silence. One by one, the giants, with hearts stirred by divine memory and knees once too proud to bend, knelt, not before a man, but before the authority of the eternal that cloaked him. The earth trembled not from their weight, but from the shift in the spiritual order, a restoration had begun. But not all bowed. From the shadows, another figure emerged, cloaked in chains of glory tarnished by rebellion. He was not of the Nephilim, but of their fathers, the fallen sons of heaven. His name was Sarel, once a prince among the Watchers, now a shadow that walked among the ruins of his children. "You speak as if the war is over," Sarel said, his voice serpentine and soft like a blade wrapped in silk. "But even the stars have scars. Who are you to command judgment?" The man turned slowly. His eyes, burning like twin coals of purpose, met Sarel's without flinching. "I am the echo of the promise. The seed spoken in Eden. The breath of the prophecy that cannot be silenced. I am the forerunner of the one who is coming with fire." Sarel stepped back, not in fear, but in calculation. He had heard this language before. In the courts of heaven. In the warnings written on the walls of the firmament. He remembered the day when thrones were cast down and scrolls sealed in judgment. "So, it begins again," he whispered, and then vanished into the darkness, fleeing not the man, but the certainty of the end. Above, the sky cracked with lightning, not of storm, but of revelation. It was as if heaven itself was responding to what had been witnessed. Angels in ranks, unseen by mortal eyes, watched from the veil beyond, and some wept, for the hour long awaited was awakening. The man turned once more to the bowed giants. "Your time of terror ends. What remains of your strength, use it not for destruction, but for restoration. For the mountains will shake, and the valleys will rise. And the world will know its Maker again. The giants lifted their heads, no longer as monsters, but as beings returning to remembrance. In the shadows, even the earth itself seemed to breathe, as if the curse of ages was breaking, slowly, but surely. Yet, far below, in the roots of the deep, others stirred. Beings not bound by flesh, not born of heaven or earth, but existing in the gaps between. They had watched the kneeling of the giants with fury. They remembered the chains of Enoch, the flood, the banishment. And now, they prepared. The man, sensing the ripples in the spiritual realm, looked to the horizon. This is only the beginning. The world will tremble not because of the giants, but because of what still hides. The presence of the man who had faced the giants was no longer confined to the wilderness. Word had begun to spread among the scattered remnants of ancient bloodlines, among the descendants of watchers and warriors, among the hidden enclaves where knowledge forbidden since Eden still lingered. The world had never known a voice like his, silent yet thunderous, gentle yet sharper than any double-edged sword. And though he spoke rarely, when he did, even the wind ceased its murmuring to listen. In the east, among the ruins of a forgotten city whose stones still echoed with the cries of fallen Nephilim, a gathering of elders debated his origin. He bears the mark, said one, pointing to a scroll with ancient writing that prophesied of a man who would carry both wrath and redemption. Another disagreed, he is no mere man. He walks as though the earth itself knows his name. The stars bow to his gaze. This is not one of us. Still, none dared to speak his name aloud. Names held power, and his was a name only the heavens dared whisper. Far beneath the ground, where fire met shadow and demonic legacies clawed at the veil between realms, the murmurs were more frantic. He has crossed the valley, they hissed. He touched the threshold of the abyss and was not consumed. The fallen ones, who once laughed at the weakness of men, now watched in silence. They remembered the day they first saw him. When the gates of a forgotten tomb had cracked open and he emerged, alive, unburnt, unbroken. The giants, those who had bowed, now served. Not in chains or slavery, but in reverence. They followed at a distance, like stars orbiting a sun too holy to touch. Some called him the flame of Adam, others, the last Enochian. He walked not just with purpose but with memory, memories not his own, but written into his blood. And when he passed through a land, the trees seemed to straighten, the rivers grew still, and even wild beasts paused in reverence. Something deep in nature itself remembered the authority that had once walked Eden, and saw it reborn in him. In one night alone, he entered a valley known only to a few, the place where the veil between heaven and earth had once torn open. There, remnants of angelic constructs still hovered, suspended in a half-existence between time and eternity. The man knelt on scorched earth and whispered a name. No one else heard it. But the skies trembled. Lightning forked silently above him. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming clarity of what was to come. His vision opened. He saw a war not yet fought, but already won. He saw kings fall without a sword drawn, empires collapse without fire, and a new city, shining with no sun, rise from what was once ashes. He saw the child of promise, hidden in the womb of time, waiting for the trumpet of the seventh seal. And in that moment, all heaven held its breath. The man stood. The dust clung to his robe as if unwilling to let him go. The air thickened with silence. From the shadows, watchers came forth, not fallen, but those who had never rebelled. They bowed. Not out of obligation. Out of awe. You carry the name, one of them said, voice echoing like 1,000 waterfalls. Not the name of a king. The name of one who was, and is to come. The man said nothing. But the mark upon his chest glowed with a light not of this world. A sigil formed of fire and eternity. The watchers stepped back, for in that moment, they remembered the prophecy. That in the end, before the great unveiling, one would come not from above, but from among